Yo, what's up guys? Welcome to another Shamshir Sound video. My name is Ali Nadem. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at layering, and I want to talk about a little bit of philosophy and some advice and what I've learned from other artists such as Olly James. And he talks about how layering you should be careful because if you take like a saw synth and you just put any sort of sounds on top of it, you might actually be doing more harm to your sound. So the whole premise, the whole idea with this is that let's say you have a saw synth such as this one. I'll show you guys what I made. So this is like a few saw oscillators. They're all on the saw wavetable, and it's a bit wide and it's a bit detuned. And so if we took this and we started stacking all these like square waves or different waves, we might actually blur and not complement it. So the whole idea and the takeaway for this video is that sometimes certain sounds don't layer well, and though you do want to mix them into it, they might not actually be congruent with what you're mixing it into. And so in this video, I want to show you what I would do to layer this synth, what layers I would put on top, what I would maybe think of. So this, because it's a very wide synth, when I think of some layers, I could add maybe a noise layer, an additional one, maybe add some brightness. I could add more saw oscillators. And it's not to say that you shouldn't maybe mix in a square wave or something else, but you should just be careful because sometimes it can take away from the sound and it'll sound worse with that layer instead of better with it. So just trust your ears. But here, what I suggest doing is, let's say we have a sound like this. I'm going to clone this and I'm going to add the layer. So we have it here. I'm going to hit right click, and I'm going to hit set children. And that way I can take the MIDI from this, cut and paste it into this. So now we have the exact same. And why did I clone it? Because what I can do is I can turn off the oscillators, but like our pitch modulation, our envelope will be the same. So you don't have to do this. You can start fresh, but I'm going to do this and I'm going to see if I can just start mixing in maybe some noise. Then we'll add maybe a mono saw layer. So at that point, it's past 20 on the amplitude, it starts to kick in. So now we have a noise layer. It's not really doing much, but let's clone this again. And what we'll do is we'll turn on maybe just one oscillator. We'll turn off the noise, and we're going to make this one monophonic, which it already is, but we're going to do one voice only. So that will turn this off. So now we're going to have one in the center. We have two oscillators that are wide, and we have a little thing giving a bit of noise. So let's just call this like noise layer. Call this the wide saw. And I'm going to call this the mono saw. And with the mono saw, I just want to introduce it slightly just to give a little bit of body, because Showtek talked about this, how like a lot of their layers, their leads, they're wide, but they always have like a mono element to really give it that body, because mono, when stuff are in mono, they really give it impact, they give it body. If you feel like your synths are too wide and they're lacking body, see what you can add in terms of a mono layer to really give it some oomph. So we've now added a noise, we've added a mono saw, might add a couple more oscillators, but let's compare this with just the wide. And now with the two added. So they're doing like their slight work. Like the whole idea with a layer I like to do is I like to be very progressive, kind of start my way slowly. I might go drastic and then back it off and slowly introduce the saw into it. So let's see if we can add a bit more to this mono saw. Maybe like a sub frequency. I could go up to 12, but I don't really want the high frequencies to be in the center. I just want that body, so I'm going to see with 0. Could also do some weird harmonic thing where I do a 7th. I'm going to try that out. Cool. And this noise layer, I'm going to make that noise layer also just in the middle. Cool, and now we have like a wide saw, a mono noise, it's a bit trickier to make a wide noise in massive. You could probably do it with a dimension expander because the voicing doesn't really apply to the noise. The noise still does its own mono thing. So if you're wondering why can't I make a wide noise in massive, you just got to do it differently. Hopefully that will be improved in the new version of massive dropping this month, which I'm really excited about. I can't wait to get my hands on that. So now we think, okay, well, what else can we do? If we take a look at the EQ, I'm going to mute this. We're just going to take a look visually. There's a lot going on, and I have a cutoff around 120 hertz. And what I would do is usually like in my breaks, I love to add a clean saw. So I love to add a sine. So let's see here. We're going to add a sub sine one, but right before that, I want to see if maybe we can squeeze out a little bit extra. Maybe put a really high-pitched harmonic saw. So I'm going to call this like wide saw high. And so now we have like 4 layers. But this one, we will just make it like just the high pitch will go up to like 12. It will really improve too if you're having elements playing different pitches. Swedish House Mafia talked about that a lot, like how they'll have a chord, but like this instrument's playing this note, this instrument's playing this note, and we're kind of doing the same thing, except different oscillators are playing different pitches at different amplitudes, whether wide or mono, to really glue each other. And they're just being introduced to the point where they're audible, but not really too obnoxious. Because there's almost only so much we can work with. You really need to give space and breathing room for the other synths. So let's introduce this one. It's going to be mono as well. Or let's do wide. Let's do wide. And we'll just go for a high pitch. We'll turn off the noise. Might be a bit too much reverb, so Don't fear turning off the noise on some of them. You could obviously reduce it or, turn it off completely, but here I just don't want it to be too muddy. So here I'm not really liking this. It's not really giving too much in terms of benefiting it. But let's again, we'll create one MIDI where it's just the normal. And we'll create one MIDI where it's just the wide saw playing so we can do kind of an A-B comparison of the two. So here we will go like this. So this is the normal and then this is the layered. See how it got a lot more body? It has a stronger core. It has a nice little brightness increase. And it's just by introducing elements slowly. But, I wouldn't start throwing on modern talking in like just some weird, wavetable that might actually do worse. Always stick with the basics. And it's not to say you shouldn't experiment and throw on weird stuff. But just be mindful that when you're layering, sometimes some layers don't actually work well with each other. You always got to listen to your ears, go with what works. And to top things up, let's add one of my favorites. We're going to add a little sub bass. The sub bass, I'll route it to number 3. And we will, why not? We'll just set children. And here I'm going to use the sine because the sine is a very clean sub. Turn off the reverb, turn off the EQ. Pretty good there. Another tip for your sub is try low passing your sub, because when you low pass your sub, you can clean a little bit of that like brightness or air that might be taking away some data from the synth itself. So what I like to do is I hold a note on the sub and I listen to see when it starts fading away, and that's where I leave my low pass at. So around like that 37, 33. And now that we're on the subject of sub, you can actually add a second oscillator. We're going to do the same one because, again, it's about keeping it congruent. This is the whole point of this video. I'm going to add one at -12, and which is really cool because now you could also do a square wave sub. You can do the other ones. They have juicy harmonics. The sine is very clean. But the sine, because it's clean, if you introduce a second sine at -12 instead of -24, you can add a little bit of a higher bass frequency into the mix, which adds that octave above, which can help add a little bit more bass, a little bit more sub power. So I'm going to introduce that one slowly. At this amplitude, it's still like you barely hear it. So it's barely there, but it is there. And because of that, Now we have a pretty nice combination. We have a lot of juicy stuff going on here. Let's make sure this is monophonic. Okay, good. And essentially, we have a nice improvement in terms of what we've added. We started with a wide saw. We then made a mono noise to add a little bit of air in the center. We then added a mono saw with a lower pitch and also a seventh harmonic in the center, giving a little bit of body. It's kind of a low pitch. Let's listen to this. The noise, the saw, the wide saw. Is this one even doing anything? What is this doing? No. Oh, yeah, we concluded that we didn't like this one, so this one for now is off. And then we have the sub. And these all really, they're carefully selected, because if you just choose anything, you can, again, do a lot of damage. And let's, again, listen to this. And then after. Before. So subtle differences, but these subtleties really increase the wall of sound. And they really, when I say wall of sound, they really give a lot more power to it. Because if we solo this and we just look at the parametric EQ, it's tough to really see a difference, but you can see that when we play this versus the other one, it will have, both audibly and visually, it will have a lot more information and really fill in that wall of sound in terms of having more harmonics. And this can be further improved upon once you start processing that, whether it be a saturation or a camel crusher or whatever you want to run that through. I like to take my layers and run them through one. Sometimes I'll run my layers through different buses and then I'll route them to the same final mix bus before it goes to the master. So that's really up to you. But I hope you guys learned something from this video, that let's say you start with a square bubbly lead. Try layering it with square. Don't go to saw immediately. Don't go to a weird wavetable, because that way you keep the oranges with the oranges, the apples with the apples, the bananas with the bananas, you know? Does that make sense? But sometimes you might want that banana with that orange, you know, have a fresh, juicy smoothie. Who knows? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But you want to be very careful with layering, because I was talking to a fellow producer, and the stuff he was layering, they were doing more harm than they were complementing each other. There was one sound that was like a hoover, there was one that was like a thin pluck, there was one that was like a saw, and when combined it became a muddy mess. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, remember to smash that like button. I'm going to let you guys download this FLP in the video description, so check that out. And with that being said, guys, feel free to leave me any suggestions. I love you guys' suggestions. And I will see you guys in the next video. Until then, take care. Make sure you guys are subscribed, and I will see you soon.